I'm Mandy Tanner, and today we're making a beautiful Snake River Farms holiday prime rib with red wine jus. So I have this beautiful prime rib. It's been sitting at room temperature for just a little bit. I took it out of the packaging yesterday and seasoned it heavily with salt so the flavor will get into the meat. It is a large piece of meat, so we're going to use a lot of seasoning. One thing I like to do to get the seasoning to adhere is use a binder. In this case, we're going to use a little bit of Dijon mustard and rub it on the roast. And this will just help the seasoning stick. We're using butcher swine on our prime rib. It's already tied, but if you want to learn how to tie a prime rib, check the link below. We've got a great video for you. I'm going to season it with our rosemary roast seasoning. Then I'm going to follow up with some fresh herbs for some extra flavor, especially on the top portion of this. It'll make for tons of texture, great presentation, and delicious flavor. I'm using rosemary and thyme. All right, we're set with this. I'm going to set it aside and get set up to make the sauce. We're going to make a red wine jus for this prime rib. It starts in a pan to get the wine reduced a little bit, and then it'll continue cooking in the oven with the roast. So to get started, I'm using a little bit of olive oil and our onions, celery, and carrots, just to build a base of flavor. And we'll season that with a little bit of pepper and some salt. We want to get the onions sweating, and so we'll let them cook for a few minutes. So our onions have become translucent. There's a nice aroma from everything, getting a little bit of color on our vegetables, so I'm going to add in our garlic. I didn't add it in the beginning because I didn't want it to burn. And I'll add in some fresh thyme sprigs and a little bit of rosemary. Rosemary's really fragrant, smells great, tastes great. It's going to add a ton of flavor. And then I'm using a fresh bay leaf. If you have one, great. If you use dried, that's just as fine. And if you don't have one, that's okay too. I'm going to saute this garlic for just about a minute until it's nice and fragrant. This is looking great. I'm going to add in my red wine. I'm using a Cabernet today. Use something that you enjoy drinking because you're not going to use the entire bottle. We'll pour that in. It already smells amazing. We're going to let this red wine come up to a boil and then reduce down. It's going to take a few minutes. So our red wine has been reducing for about 10 minutes, and you can see the vegetables have started to absorb some of that. The flavors have deepened greatly, and there's a beautiful aroma in the kitchen. I'm using some beef stock. We're going to add some extra richness to the final sauce with this. And we'll just bring that up to a simmer, and then we're going to transfer it into our roasting pan. So we've got our red wine sauce in the bottom of our roasting pan. I'm using a rack to keep the meat up off of the sauce. Then I'll transfer our beautiful prime rib onto the rack. Now, whether you use a wireless thermometer or an instant read thermometer, the internal temperature is what you're going to want to watch for doneness for this roast. I'm going to insert this one into the center, avoiding the bone. That looks great. We've got our oven preheated to 250 degrees. We're going to start low and slow with this one, and then we'll finish it off with a high temperature at the end and get that nice crust. So this is ready to go to the oven. Beautiful prime rib has just come out of the oven. So I'm going to transfer it over here to this baking sheet and tent it with foil so it can rest for about 30 minutes and up to an hour. So the entire time our prime rib cooked, it was dripping all of those gorgeous juices down into our roasting pan. I'm gonna remove the rack and set it aside, and we're gonna strain this beautiful red wine sauce. In the oven, it's had time to develop so much flavor. And we'll remove the vegetables. If it's a little bit thick, you can add more beef stock to thin out the sauce and to stretch it a little bit further. And if it's a little bit thin, you can always keep it on the heat and let it simmer until it's reduced quite a bit. But this one's looking pretty good. So our prime rib has been resting, and we're gonna take it to the oven to a high heat, 500 degrees. So we have our beautiful prime rib that's been roasted and rested, and the first step is going to be to remove any of the butcher's twine. And I just like to use scissors and snip it off, and it's okay if some of the seasoning comes off with that. It's to be expected. Okay, and then I will remove and discard the butcher's twine. Get my beautiful prime rib onto our cutting board. And for this, we're gonna wanna slice the bones off first. So using my chef's knife, I'm gonna follow along the line of the bones and just remove the whole plate of bones. Get this side off. And now for our beautiful prime rib. When you remove the bones first, it's great because then you can slice cleanly through the entire roast in different size portions as desired for your guests. So let's take a look. It's gorgeous. Beautiful medium rare, just how I like it. We are ready to serve this. I've plated my prime rib on this beautiful platter, and I'm serving it with some of that red wine jus that we had cooking in the oven with our holiday roast.